Hello, welcome to the Inclusive Cities. One of the most inspiring urbanists of all times, Jane Jacobs, once wrote, cities have the capability of providing something for everybody only because and only when they're created by everybody. And this has been the theme of our discussions at the Inclusive Cities series that I and Elsa have been hosting throughout this lockdown as part of our quarantine experiment. We think that this is a moment of great reflection where we can actually outline tactics to build back better cities and take everyone along. And those are some of the ideas that we've been profiling and putting a spotlight on during this program. I'm Pratima Manohar. I'm the founder of the Urban Vision, and I co-host this session with my colleague Elsa Marie De Silva, she and I are part of the Stanford CDDRL Leadership Network for Change, and I'm so excited to host a session today. Elsa?
Thanks, Pratima. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. And once again, welcome to Inclusive Cities. I'm Elsa Marie De Silva. I'm the founder and CEO of Red Dot Foundation. And today we are talking about Queeristan. So this is Inclusive Cities for All. And with us, we have three amazing people. And they are really fun to be with. I consider two of them close friends, and I'm going to look forward to getting to know Abhina well as well. So who do we have? So we have Parmesh Shahani, who is the Vice President at Godrej Industries and the founder of the award-winning Godrej Culture Lab, which is a unique place in Mumbai and in India. And they do amazing things, so do check them out. And then we have Harish Iyer, who is a very good friend of mine as well. And he is the founder of the Jimmy Foundation. And we have Abhina Aham, who is the founder of the Tweet Foundation. And I think she just stepped out for a moment. So in the meantime, welcome, Parmesh. I am so pleased to have you here because you just launched your book, Queeristan. So please tell us, how are you doing during COVID-19? And tell us a little bit about this book.
So it's been surreal the past few months, right? Because everything is topsy-turvy in a sense, With me, it's been, whether it's personal life, whether it's been work, it's really been a time of reassessment, reconfiguration. Everyone at work has pivoted. So it's nothing new to say we've pivoted. But I think it's been interesting the past few months because it was the time, my first book, we had a revised edition that came out in June, and Queeristan was supposed to come out at around the same time. But, because of everything, it kind of got delayed till now. And I think that has been very interesting because in this time, I've actually had time to think about what is the relevance of a book which talks about, LGBTQ inclusion in the corporate world post-COVID. And what I've realized is that it's especially relevant in these days because so much of the conversation around COVID was new normal. But, in Queeristan, we write about how, we want to create this ideal world of inclusion. We can't go back to being that same old, normal. So, of course, we want to create a new normal. But to me, this new normal has to be an inclusive normal. It has to be a more equitable normal. The new normal has to be Queeristan. An India in which we're all valid, we're all respected, we all help each other, an intersectional India in which we recognize that all our struggles are connected, and an LGBT community in which we love and respect each other and recognize that all of us within the LGBT community as well have to help each other. So it's given me time to reflect, and I think, the book coming out now around the time of the September, the second anniversary of the 2018 verdict, is actually very much more poignant because it's given me time to kind of reframe in the light of COVID the importance and the impetus towards creating this better world. So that's what I've been doing. I've been, thinking about the book. Harish and Abhina are both very much in the book They're both key characters in the book, and there are so many others, friends from all over the world who are in the book. So it's been amazing actually to be just thinking of these thoughts in this context.
Elsa is on mute. Elsa, you're on mute.
Yeah, I put myself on mute too because I live on this road where these ambulances keep going up and down, so I didn't want to get disturbed. But congratulations once more on this book, and I do believe that by putting a book out, especially on this key topic, you're actually giving people knowledge and skills to address this issue. And that comes to Harish and me. We've been doing so many webinars helping young people think about what does it mean to be on the spectrum of gender, and how does it impact our lives. And awareness is actually very poor out there, simply because we don't talk about it in our regular settings. Two, there's not enough education in our schools or in our formal settings. Harish, so in that sense, can you share a little bit about, first of all, welcome, and then share a little bit about what inclusive cities means to you?
I think what we need to understand when we are speaking about inclusion is that it's not just one aspect of our being. I'm not just queer. I am not just gay. I'm a gay. I'm also somebody who is a cis man. I'm also somebody who belongs to a certain socioeconomic background. So I need to be included. Even if one of my identities gets excluded, I get excluded. So that's something that we need to realize. And that's something that's brought out very beautifully in Parmesh's book as well. Because all these identities live with us, live in us. So if you exclude one part of it, in whether we are speaking about inclusive cities or inclusive towns, inclusive countries, or inclusive organizations, I think it's very important to understand that inclusion, it cannot be piecemeal. It can't just be that I include one part of you and I don't include another part of you, but I want you to feel included. So it means the sum of us. It doesn't mean a part of us, but the sum of us, because sum of all our experiences would make us. So we are a bunch of minorities within us, and we are a bunch of majorities within us. So when we are speaking about inclusion, it has to be inclusive of everything, all the realities that we live.
Thank you, Harish. Abhina, welcome once again to our live cast. And I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on inclusive cities and what has been your experience thus far?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think a huge congratulations to my sweetheart Parmeshwar for doing this. I think he was telling me that it took him an year to do that. And my first question was to Parmesh was, how did he manage to do it within all this amazing work that he's doing and always keeping himself busy? I think the one thing that I just want to talk about is that we are leading towards a new normal, and that new normal would not like to keep everybody outside the paradigm of acceptance and inclusivity. When you have a country of a prime minister who says sabka saath sabka vikas, everybody's together and everybody has to be flourished, that everybody, the definition of everybody has to be included, with all the people that are from the LGBTI community, queer community, are as well. As you see, that this queer community is not only being part of the society, but also contributing immensely to the economy of the country. And I think acceptance and within the society of becoming a new normal about a person, if that person has been identified with different sexuality or a gender or sexual preferences, I think the importance of accepting those people, in a similar manner, like if any person who is heterosexual should be treated, is a new lingo of the new world. I think Parmesh is very well addressing those aspects. I think Parmesh is very well letting us know to a next level of a new India, we are heading towards the 75th, independence year in next 2 years. I don't think so. We should be talking a lot which has been there in the past, and we must focus on that future. That future is inclusive. That future is diverse, and that future it holds equal opportunities, equal acceptance, and equal spaces for you, me, and everybody, despite of your sexuality, gender, caste, creed, and other things also. And I think Queeristan as a book talks about those acceptance. The Queeristan is the book that talks about those spaces that you and me have to create together. I don't think so. It is a silo work, but that I think it is an inclusive effort that Queeristan is heading towards, and I think that is extremely important in a society.
Pratima,
Yeah, again muted. Sorry about that. I think this is such a seminal conversation to have at this moment in our history. In a way, this pandemic has revealed so many fractures in our society, and it's such a good moment to use this opportunity to make things better. And I want to kind of talk a little bit about why this conversation is so important in terms of inclusion. And I'm just going to be a little bit wonkish about it. There is an urban scholar called Richard Florida, and I think his gay index is probably mentioned in Parmesh's new book.
In fact, I've marked out the pages to read for you after you finish spontaneously.
Okay, great. And I just posted the link to the book, the Amazon link. So please buy it to learn more about how to create more inclusive workspaces. But Richard Florida, in his book, The Creative Class, developed the Gay Index, where he actually showed the connection between acceptance of the LGBT plus community with economic prosperity and innovation. So if your city had a higher gay index, it was a more economically vibrant and creative city. So a city that supports its gay community, the LGBT plus community, is also likely to embrace everybody in its society, whether it's women, migrants, people from different races and religions. And consequently, it creates a melting pot of sorts of creativity and innovation. And some of the most successful places in the world are those places. So I want to ask all of you your own kind of personal insight into places that have demonstrated this in your own lives, where you've been able to thrive. I know some of you have struggled in the cities or places that you've lived in, but has there been places which has made you come alive? And tell us a little bit about what makes those places great places to live in. Parmesh, do you want to talk to us about it? And tell us about the pages where we can read about this creative.
Sure, I do want to talk about it, but I want to add to the numbers that I want to just add some numbers for everyone who's watching. Because one of the things we've done in Queeristan is give great stories. So you will find Harish's story, you will find Abhina's story, you will find their parents' stories, you'll find their mother's stories of acceptance. But around the stories are hard facts and numbers. Because this book is going to be read by a lot of people. Sometimes our moving stories are not enough. They should be, but people often need to show me the facts. So I want to actually, before I tell you about what I love in the city, the first is the correlation of Richard Florida with inclusion is 0.72%. It's a significant positive correlation between queer friendliness and having a better economy, right? So the more queer friendly you are, the better you are, and this is true for city level, for state level, as well as for country level. That's what's so amazing, right? So the research they did, it extrapolates, and it's very interesting. If you look at it, even in India, you look at places like Bombay and Bangalore, and you see which are more queer friendly, and you can see even as cities, they are vibrant and thriving versus say so many others, right? The second important number that I want to tell you is that because a lot of people who are watching this will be either from HR or from policy, there is a direct correlation between being inclusive and an increase in foreign direct investment. Now we know
Wow.
India and so many other countries are all chasing FDI, right? And a Deloitte 2014 report talks about how there is a direct correlation. Third correlation, of course, you can read more about it in the book. The third important number is between, this great report that Singapore AmCham, they cited this incredible Harvard Business Review article that talks about even within the country, states which have laws that specifically they prohibit discrimination against LGBTQ citizens, even within the same country. Like America's, states have different laws. So the states that have laws that says you can't discriminate against our queer citizens have 8% more patents and 11% more patent citations than other states, right? So there's a clear correlation between inclusion and innovation. Likewise for migration as well, right? And I actually end this chapter. I mean, over the past few years, we've seen a lot of migration, a lot of voluntary migration happens, with talent out of places like India and so on. At least under 2018, a lot of the people who, the IIT group, for example, which filed, Harish also filed a petition, and there were so many others. But in the IIT petition, it was quoted by saying that one of the reasons were that so many of them are saying we want to apply to Canada because we don't want to live in our own country, right? So I end the chapter by saying, why should foreign countries get our queer talent? Why should our talent migrate to everyone else, right? So, I mean, I wanted to give you these because it's not just, being more inclusive. It doesn't just feel good for us as queer citizens. It makes eminent economic sense to have inclusive cities, inclusive states, and inclusive countries. The more inclusive you are, the more money you make. It's as simple as that. And I want people seeing this to actually understand that. So even if you don't, I wish you care about us as human beings and people, but certainly you care about money. So there's a direct link between being inclusive and making more money. I think I've spoken enough now, so I want to, let Harish and Abhina tell you their stories. But I really wanted to.
Quickly, Parmesh, are there places where you've lived in where you really felt that you could thrive in?
Yeah, I've thrived in, I think, Bombay, Mumbai is one such place. And, all three of us, Harish, Abhina, me, have grown up in a sense. We've been in other parts, but our queerness, I think, the city has defined us and helped us define our queerness. But here also, I want to say it's don't think that if you are just in a big city, it's queer friendly. My friend Dhiren Burissa, who is a professor at OP Jindal, his JNU thesis was upon exclusion, even in big cities like Delhi, of people who are Dalit, because he mapped exclusion practices on Grindr as well as in physical Delhi. So we have to understand that even in a big city, there might be populations who don't feel included and not, which is why it's so nuanced, right? I mean, because it's when you say inclusive cities for who? I think that's the question.
Right. Harish, how about you? Which are places?
I think Bombay is the mecca of LGBT movement. I mean, I have never ever felt at home in any other part of the world. I would say world also. Even when I went to the US and other places, I thought that okay, let me go to my gay space, which is Bombay. But let me also add that even in a place like Bombay, it all depends on life is not very easy for people who are in the closet. The moment it's just human tendency that the moment moment people know that you have something to hide, there are people who would come up with a lot of tactics to either threaten you, to scare you, to ensure that you stay in the closet and you don't come out. So even when I'm saying that I have not faced exclusion, even in a city like Bombay, I know many people who have faced exclusion, even in a city like Bombay. So when you have a secret, when you have something to hide, there will be people who would want to blackmail you, scare you, and ensure that you stay in the closet, irrespective of which part of the world you live in. But having said that, there are more places where I'll find people like me in Bombay.
Right.
Calcutta again has has a culture where you will find people like you, and familiarity helps in this, in especially when you feel very lonely and you think. And I'm talking about an era where where we didn't have Grinder, where we didn't have uh, Tinder and Grinder, and all these apps weren't there, where we had to rely on the look in the person's eye to actually find out whether the other person was gay or not. Even at that point, we had places where we could safely go and sit down. Even Bangalore had places. So we all had these secret hideout places. In fact, Parmesh's previous book, Gay Bombay, actually speaks about all these things in much detail as well. So I think what's more important is to understand that inclusion and life can be so difficult for people who are in the closet, irrespective of where you live. But if you see people who are like you will be motivated to find allies in those people. So I think to have a visible, vibrant, visible community of LGBT people is extremely important. And LGBT people are not all alike. I mean, there is huge diversity within the LGBT community itself. So what's important is that previously we used to look for LGBT people. Now we are looking for LGBT people like us in Bombay. So I think we have kind of migrated from a point where we are just looking for queer people, but now we are started looking for queer people whom we like. Which is a huge shift from where we were and where we are even as a city.
And is there something about Bombay that makes it this place where everybody can thrive? Is it because it was always that melting pot, or is there something else about the design and the physicality of the city that enables that?
I think Bombay, in Bombay you can't be bothered about someone's sexuality when you have to catch the 8 a.m. local. You can't be
Right.
bothered about who the person who's standing next to you, whether the person is gay or straight, when when you know that you have to reach your office on time or you're going to be stuck in floods. You're not going to be bothered about saving someone's when you're saving someone's life, because you're just saving someone's life when there are
Right.
floods and you're opening your door. So I think that the fact that it's so overpopulated and it's a melting pot of cultures helps Bombay as well. But that's again not to say, what really happens in these forums is that sometimes we appropriate our personal experiences because we come from points of privilege, and we appropriate it to the whole city. You could have discrimination even within a city like Bombay, but by and large, it's much safer. And yeah, you can't be bothered. You don't have time to be bothered in Bombay as compared to
Hmm.
Calcutta or some other city.
Abina, what about you? What is your
Yeah.
experience?
Yeah, actually, I would also like to go back a little bit. Like, for example, the book of Parmesh talks about Queeristan, and I would also like to say Hindustan. British before the invasions and everything happened, the kind of society that Hindustan has been having was the basic premises that we worked on the inclusion, respect, and diversity. And you see it a lot of our historical relevances and evidences talks about it, that our sexuality, sexual behaviors, and our identities were celebrated at some point of time in India. And as a result of that, Hindustan was very rich and very much welcoming to other people. Coming back, cut to the modern world at this point of time in 20th century. I belong to Mumbai, and I have learned my LGBT mantras from Mumbai. So I have seen a very distinct, diverse situations for various states. But you know what? We all must understand that though we have been talking about Mumbai and Bombay, and there has been a lot of development in these things, and there has been a lot of acceptance and tolerance about these things. We must also realize the first gay pride in India was organized by 7 or 8 people, which includes Ashok Rao, Kavi Pavandhal, Aditya Bandyopadhyay, and several other people, and it was held in West Bengal. So there was already a culture of sexual minority which was operating in itself, and which has some amount of tolerance within the society. The only problem was that people did not wanted to talk about it. They felt that if we talk about it, you will become prey to discrimination, and you will become prey to the exclusion. But as I have been part of the city like Bombay, I have traveled in fact lot of states, fortunately, because of my work in India, and I have seen that is each of the city has some or other relevance. Like for example, if you go to Gujarat, there is an entire LGBT festival which happens within the Gujarat. Right now I'm in Ahmedabad, and here in Vadodara there is Prince Manvendra, and everybody actually have annual festival of queer related aspects. If you go to Tamil Nadu, you have for transgender especially, you have a Kuagam festival. Not only transgenders, but for cross dressers, for Koti people, and everybody, you have a Kuagam festival, and that has a huge relevance to the tourism, because people across the country, they come all the way over here to see how these things have been celebrated within the aspect where transgender people or Koti people or cross-dresser people are actually getting married to the god, and then the entire ceremony and all those kind of things. So each of the state has some or other elements of the Queeristan that you can see it across, just to bring back the focus to the book. And each of the states were emerging slowly and heavy. Point about Bombay and Mumbai was specifically because Bombay has been always considered a city of dreams. It was always a city where industrialization has brought a lot of people together from various, and you have a cosmopolitan population from all across the state, which are coming to Mumbai for survival. So you see, the Bombay it encompasses the culture, the diversity of India. It is actually technically the heart of India. Though Delhi is considered to be Rajdhani, but still Mumbai is what they call it as the heart of India. And within the heart, we have been seeing is that there has been a lot of momentum on LGBT rights. Organizations like Hamsafar Trust, various other organizations that work on LGBT work actually started, kind of the first InfoSem integrated sexual minority meeting was happened in Mumbai, where more than 139 community-based organizations all across India met for the first time, and it was attended by mainstream actors like Kiran Kher, and it was an issue. It wasn't an issue at that point of time. It was such a mainstream thing about it. What I'm trying to say, that over the period of time, because we lived in a society which was not knowledgeable about their communities, their issues, and there has been reluctance. So whenever I talk about transgender, I talk about that people always associate three feelings about transgender: either they feel sorrow, either they feel pity, or either they feel mysterious about transgender. Lack of knowledge has been the big ghost for us for understanding queer issues. It has been threat among the people for having more inclusive society, and working towards inclusion within the workspaces also for HR and other people, is that because they don't understand people who belong to the queer community, because they've never interacted with them, because their families have not talked to them. Their educational institution doesn't have a curriculum that talks about sexuality and gender. Today also, within the educational spectrum, we talk about good touch and bad touch. Do we talk about differences on sexuality and gender? I see people like Harish actually are going to various educational institutions, talking to these young people who are going to be graduated in the communication, and he's dealing with several important aspects, specifically around gender acceptance, gender sexuality related aspects. And right now, when we talk about the HR policies also within the workspace, we don't see enough initiative, because those initiatives, there's still the companies and HR people are not understanding that is having inclusive policies can actually make your companies more creative, be more lucrative to the business, and see more from the brand value that you are going to do. We have a World Bank survey also which has been which has been talking about that you have more to lose if you are you're not inclusive, and if you are exclusive, you have more to lose business, because people who belong to the queer community can contribute wisely. Then what Harish and everybody was also talking about is that we have a huge Bollywood industry, and there are several people from the Bollywood industry also uh, uh, belong to the queer community. We know all about that. There is a lot of hush hush about it. There's a lot of talk about it. But what is stopping them from coming out is a stigma. There's a big issue about stigma, which we have to deal it out when we talk about the Queeristan, when we talk about inclusive world. And why should we have a so the biggest part about this entire perspective is not only acceptance from your families and the society, but the biggest enemy that we are facing right now is the young leadership who's still facing self stigma. Once they come out of the self stigma, once they are out and we are discussing about it, if you are a gay, bisexual, if you are a transgender, if you are a queer, if you are intersex, whatever you are, there's nothing wrong with being what you are, and you have been you have been made the way you have been made. When I went for the first time in Hamsafar Trust, and when I was talking to Ashok, and I was telling that I think I am Vikrut, which means that I am somebody who non-natural, and that's why probably society is not accepting me. And Ashok turned back, Ashok Rao Kavi, and he said to me, "What is Vikrut? Prakruti evam Vikruti evam Prakruti," which means that whatever there in a society is natural. It's part of a society. It's part of this entire world. And what is stopping us from opening our hearts and opening our eyes and seeing what is the truth and accepting it? It is just going to help us. It is not going to threaten us. You, unless you are insecure about yourself, if you are insecure about yourself, you will close the eyes and you will see, okay, what I see in front of me is the truth. You would not like to go into facts and situations, and actually we are humans too. LGBT community is humans too. If you give an opportunity, we can contribute to the economy. We can make your workplace fun. We can also create your HR policies much more inclusive and prominent, and at the same time we can create a better world, and we can create more better Queeristan. And by meaning to things, by saying that, I'm not saying that is we are on the voyage where we are saying that we are conquer everything. LGBT is going to hijack everybody. No, that's not the thing. We are just asking for equal space for you and for me as well, and the self-respect.
This is such a fascinating discussion, and a thought just crossed my mind. Like, certain spaces, because of the acceptance and the high tolerance to all, attracts. So I know from my staff itself, people from smaller towns have moved to the city, and especially Bombay, because there's a comfort in knowing that you will not be discriminated against. You can live a pretty normal life with not people staring at you, or just being nasty. And I come from the aviation industry, and we always had a very high number of queer folk. And I spent 20 years there, and it never occurred to me that other places didn't accept them, because for us it was pretty normal to have people working with us who are queer and all kinds of queer. So I wonder whether even industries and sectors attract people, because of that comfort zone. So, talking about which, can you help us understand what is the intersectionality and the complexity when it comes to urban spaces, and how this environment, whether it is the ecosystem like Bombay or maybe a rural town that is not so forthcoming, how does that put pressure, especially when it comes to social and spatial oppression? Parmesh, do you want to kickstart that discussion?
Uh, yeah, so I think both Harish and Abhina would be great to talk about intersectionality as well. But I do want to uh, just allude to something you were saying earlier. And I think when you look at inclusive cities, you look at it upon various dimensions. So I'm thinking of three dimensions. First is, inclusive infrastructure, right? Civic infrastructure. Do you have, mayors or chief ministers or public officials? Do you have public infrastructure? Like, for example, is it easy to get permission for prides, and do you have in general a supportive police and so on? Is the city itself physically inclusive, right, on various dimensions, right? Whether it's accessibility for PWD, with queer people, is it, do you have like railway stations, for example, who have all access washrooms and things like that, right? The second is culture, and what is the attitude of people in the city. So, and the third, I think, which is what we should talk about more, is what you're talking about, intersectional queerness within the city, right? Because are we reimagining queerness as something that intersects with other dimensions? I think if you look at the conversation we've been having so far, I think, say, Mumbai is very, very inclusive in terms of people and culture. But I think if you have to look at infrastructure and a civic imagination, I would say that, and I talk about this in the book as well, there are smaller cities now in India which are very, very inspiring.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
the example of Raipur Pride, right? I mean, where the chief minister himself supported, before Raipur Pride took place, the chief minister, Bhupesh Baghel, attended a mass transgender wedding. That gave the Raipur Pride organizers, LGBTQ Chhattisgarh, the courage to say we want to do Raipur Pride. They organized it. It was very well attended with a 2.5 kilometer long rainbow flag. Now, we don't have a 2.5 kilometer long flag in Mumbai, but Raipur Pride has had it. I mean, so I think if you look at the future kind of inclusive, so far in the past, places like Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, certainly using Florida's theory of, say, creative class, are inclusive. But I think the future is going to be very much about these smaller cities, right? And Abhina has been traveling, and Abhina has been telling us about all the change that has been happening across. And I think the future will also happen because in all these cities, you will find these change agents. You will find chief ministers, right? So Kerala, for example, has a very inclusive government. As a result, cities in Kerala are way more queer friendly, even the smaller ones, whether it's Kochi and so on, right? And I think the third aspect, which is what you spoke about, which is intersectional queerness, right? In each city, do we imagine, I mean, does the queer population and do straight allies in the city think of queerness as something that intersects with other social movements, right? So I think this is also going to be fundamental because we cannot, even within the queer movement, right? We can't say 377 is gone and now we should all party, because we have a trans act which is far from ideal. There are so many legal things that still need to be done, whether it is anti-discrimination, whether it is marriage, whether it is so many things, right? So even within, are we as a queer movement saying that we need to work on multiple fronts, and are we as at a city level, are the different social movements recognizing that to make a better city, we all in a sense need to have these conversations with each other, right? So Harish's work with Jimmy Foundation, intersecting animal rights and human rights, right? And how do we care for the environment, care for queer rights, care for gender, build alliances with the anti-caste movement and so many others, and say that to be an inclusive city, we have to be inclusive on all these dimensions is, I think, the question.
Thanks, Parmesh. And Harish, I know you were super excited with Pete Buttigieg's candidacy for the president of the United States. And he was an exciting candidate, not only in the US, but all over the world. And to me, if you can't see it, you can't be it. Examples like, I have friends in the US who are, maybe gay parents with children, or lesbian parents with children, or my friend, her son dresses in a dress and goes to school, and it's perfectly acceptable and normal. So we are nowhere there yet, right? So when we're talking about urban space and literally accepting people as they are, I know when Godrej Culture Lab, I know people are comfortable enough to come in whatever they want to wear, but I don't see that. And they have come to my events, our events at ISDI. But outside of that, there are very few places where people are comfortable just being who they are, even in Mumbai. Can you share more about what is your experience?
See, when we are speaking about intersectionality, we should also be wary about pinkwashing. My personal experience is that I've had many places which are advertised as LGBT friendly in Bombay. I mean, they'll say that it's all right, but at the same time, when you actually reach there, like I had been to Bar Stock Exchange once, and I was there with a guy, and the board over there, they actually stopped me at the door and they said that only couples are allowed. So this friend of mine, I just told the security person over there that we both are a couple, so please allow us to get in. And then they suddenly came back by saying that no, couple matlab ladka aur ladki. Okay, so it was very clear that but if you look at it, Bar Stock Exchange was a place which was frequented by so many people and so many people from the LGBT community, but they just wanted us when it was not a crowded space or something of that kind. Then they wanted us. Otherwise, they wanted women. The the funny the the, the funny aspect was that while me and this guy were trying to get inside Park Stock Exchange in Lower Parel, there was a queer couple, but both of them were women. Okay, so it was a lesbian couple which was there inside, and they had no issue taking the lesbian couple inside because they were women. Okay, and which simply means that there could be more men who could come to the this thing when there are more women inside. So for them, it was when you look at discrimination, it even in places which advertise and say that they are LGBT friendly and they're queer friendly, which give you the vibe of queer friendliness. It even those places can be extremely discriminatory. Uh, I know of many people who have been to restaurants in Bombay, and people from the Hijra community who have been to restaurants, and there were these big looks that were given to them, and they had to get up and they had to move out of the restaurant. So what we have to be really wary of is pinkwashing. Because what is also happening in a lot of these places, even in a place like Bombay, which is queer friendly as compared to many other places as well. As a city, you can have a certain vibe, and you might have establishments in the city which are discriminatory, which could happen everywhere. You know, if you look at Calcutta, for instance, Calcutta is very LGBT friendly, so to say. That's what many of my friends tell me. But we had Suzette Jordan, who was my friend, who was a woman who was a rape survivor, who was she went to a restaurant called Ginger, and she was not served food over there because she was a rape survivor. So is it okay to be LGBT friendly and not be friendly to other things? So you might have a wonderful vibe, because there are many times when people are LGBT friendly, but when they are LGBT friendly, they are just LGBT friendly when you belong to a certain class or you belong to a certain social strata in the society. They are not LGBT friendly when you have somebody who is hijra and comes and stands over there. Then you're not LGBT friendly. So there is this, when we speak about intersectionality, we need to understand that there is discrimination even within the sphere of LGBT friendliness, where you might want LGBT, but you would want LGBT people of your type, of a certain prototype. That's what you would cater to. You're not cater to any LGBT person. You don't have an open door policy where any LGBT person could come in. You want LGBT people, but only of a certain type. So I think that's something that is true of all places, including Bombay.
Thanks, Harish, for that. And it's really sad that, given that it's 2020, we are still dealing with some of these issues. And you're right, it's based on convenience. Rules are made, and it's really at the time of the day or time of the year that it's convenient to implement. I wanted to ask Ahira, Abhina, but based on what Parmesh said, since you've been traveling across the country, have you seen some of this changing in different cities and towns? And can you share some positive examples, because I know there are lots and lots of issues, but I think we need some positivity and some hope as well.
Yeah, so thank you for that question, and I just wanted to also add to that. Like I am actually I am one of the very rarest specimen of Hijra community who has worked in 9 to 5 job. Being part of the Hijra construct, there has been a very few people who have come forward and decided to work in social sector or in a mainstream job and not choosing traditional jobs of a Hijra community, which is called as badhai or any other forms of educational, any other form of kind of survival options. So for me, when I decided to become part of Hijra community member, and I also told my guru and everybody that is, like I am going to still work. I'm not going to I need to take my community forward, and I need to create spaces for people like me who belong to Hijra community or transgender community, whether they are trans men or trans women or any other people, actually live the life with dignity and claim those spaces which talks about inclusive society. So there has been a very uphill climb for people like me. And now the other thing that I want to talk about it, when we talk about LGBT community, the transgender people are more vulnerable, especially not only transgender people but also gay people who are extreme little bit feminine, or they don't fit into the norms of a society, of the binary terms of a man and a woman, how they should be dressed and how they should be looking and how they should be behaving. The moment you deviate from those norms, you are prey to the discrimination, you are prey to hatred, you are prey to hate, non-acceptance. Now I just want to talk about one example. I was working 9 to 5 job, and I was traveling to Kerala in 2012, 2012, I guess. And 17 hotels in a row refused to give me admission at that point of time in Kerala. I had my ID card, I had my booking done, and they did not allow me to say. They were giving all sorts of excuses for not allowing me to admit in those hotels. I was there to have a meeting with government officials, and they were not allowing me. Finally, I had to take a hotel which is outskirts of Kerala and stay there. When I started talking to government of Kerala about it, they said that we don't have transgenders, we don't have people like you. And I was so surprised. I said, how come Kerala, which is supposed to be a city which has the highest literacy level, will not have transgender? I started investigating, and I found out that because of the patriarchal society, because of this lot of norms within the society which is not allowing people to live the way we want to live, a lot of transgenders were migrating to Mumbai, Maharashtra, they were migrating to Karnataka, and they were migrating to Andhra. We actually work with transgender people, and we established first ever transgender pride in Kerala. Now Kerala is the leading state on transgender rights. They are giving free of cost surgeries to the transgender. There is gender neutral washrooms. There are policies like social welfare schemes and other things which has been mentioned. Chhattisgarh has those friendly policies, but we still do. There are so many. Chhattisgarh has welfare board, but Maharashtra don't have welfare board. It's the same Mumbai that we are talking about. Now they have a welfare board, but previously they did not have. So it's the same Mumbai that we were talking about, that they were friendly to the LGBT community, but they were not willing to recognize the rights of the transgender people. So what I'm trying to say, that how cities and how states have picked up the acceptance has been quite challenging and diverse, and it all depend upon the political parties. It all depends upon the people who are involved in and engaged, the organizations and the individual who are engaged into this kind of a social activism. So it is a long battle, and my experience, if you see, is that the fact remains is that the biggest battle that I fought was with my family. Once my mother accepted me, for me it has been a very easy way forward for me to take forward this battle, because once my relatives were accepting me, for me, facing where I, for example, I started working in India HIV AIDS Alliance in 2010. They did not had any transgender policy, did not have gender neutral washroom. If a woman gets pregnant, she gets a maternity leave. If a transgender goes through a surgery, will they get a paid leave for 45 days? We started working at the early at 2010, 2011. So there has been a lot of work which has happened when it comes to having an inclusive society or having agenda of gender, sexuality and diversities and all those kind of things. Still, we are not there, I feel. But I think the efforts like creating this book by Parmesh it will give very solid directions to not only people from the community, but especially people who are ally or outside the community who are sitting there watching this, but they don't want to take any action about it, will get involved into the process and try to create a better inclusive society. Because the problem is that, you know what, there are so many people who are sitting on the fence of it, who can do so many things for LGBT community, but they are just waiting for each other to make that first move. And I think if you want to talk about the larger inclusive society for LGBTI people, and each of us, whether you are LGBT, whether you are not LGBT, whether you are ally or not ally, you have to, you know, make a small move about it. This is a collective effort. This is not something which will be managed by one or two person.
Thank you. I think you're right. I think there is a need for action to enable everybody in our communities to thrive. And as an urban policymaker and designer, I want to talk to you a little bit about the urban discourse. A lot of the discussions have largely in places around the world have focused on decline of places owned or dedicated to the LGBT plus community or neighborhoods, right? Like, so there was a study in London which said that over the last decade or so, hundreds of spaces that were dedicated to the community has closed down. Some experts think of this as a sign of mainstreaming and tolerance to these communities. So I want to ask you two questions. One is, do we need such dedicated spaces for minority communities in our cities? Do you see these spaces as sanctuaries or ghettos? And if what advice would you give folks involved in envisioning and making cities? How can we contribute to social movements such as the LGBT plus communities who are still fighting for change and acceptance and justice within our communities? Parmesh, would you like to start? You're on mute too.
Yeah, sure. So I think the first advice, and actually the most important, is to anyone who wants to solve some of these complex issues that are in our present. And Elsa will know this because Elsa has done the Yale World Fellows program, right? I mean, we cannot, and it's one of the things that we learned there, you cannot solve these in silos, and you cannot do it yourself. So it's very clear that cities are the future. The trends are very clear, right? Over the past few decades, and even more so ahead. India and the world are urbanizing. And how do we make better, more inclusive cities? Very clearly by collaborating with various stakeholders. So I think it has to be both ways, right? All of us have to be willing. Unfortunately, for a lot of us who are in, whether who do civic activism, or whether we're in the corporate world, or whether we're in NGOs, or whether, we find it like tiresome or tedious to collaborate with municipal authorities, or, to work on long-term, grapple with long-term solutions. But that is the only way. And you saw what happened post-COVID, right? So many of the relief efforts, it was companies that were donating time, money, and supplies. It was, state and city authorities who were coordinating things. It was NGOs who were working together. It was everyone who was working together to try and make sense of it and to try and come up to a solution, right? So I think likewise for the future, right? I think cities that the economic case is very clear. For cities to do well and to thrive, they have to be more inclusive. People who run cities, states, and countries who understand this will reach out and engage with various stakeholders, including certainly queer stakeholders, because we are 4 to 10% of the population. We are here. We are not going anywhere. We have every right, all the rights that our constitution gives us, and we want to collaborate and in creating this more inclusive India together. So I think one is for cities to reach out to us and say, how do we create more queer friendly cities? It's very clear in even within queer friendly, there are some things that we have to do more.
Right.
There are within the queer spectrum, our trans brothers and sisters are more visible. So we certainly need to create infrastructure which is more trans friendly, I would say, to start with, right? Can we start with at a very basic level, public washrooms, train stations, and so on? Can we imagine these cities, the public infrastructure to be more trans inclusive? And can we as queer people partner our city state authorities in doing that? So I think it's I have a lot more to say, but I think it's fundamental now that we started off by saying that we have to reimagine this new normal, but I think to reimagine it and to co-create it, we all have to pretty much roll up our sleeves and work together. uh, and I'm actually looking forward to the next phase of saying, we have won certain rights are still yet to be won, whether it's the Trans Act and so many others. But while we are fighting those battles in court, how are we collaborating with each other across with other stakeholders and actually doing this building bricks of creating this new infrastructure? And I'm looking forward to those projects.
Harish, you're on mute again. Yeah.
So I personally feel, when we are speaking about whether we are speaking about civic bodies or speaking, it's only now that people have started understanding that we are a sizable population, and also the fact that since our demographics, if you look at our demographics, most of us are below the age of 25, and all of them are, uh, you know, practically all of them are supporters of the LGBT community. So what really is happening is now people are taking notice. They're looking at us as a vote bank. Now people want to appear LGBT friendly, but even the number of people who are doing that are pretty less at this moment. Um, we need to, I think, and the problem is twofold. The problem is not just from civic authorities and city planners and other people, municipalities and other people, but the problem also is within the LGBT community. We, uh, we, we could be, we could be homosexuals, but we are definitely not homogeneous. And that's something that people need to understand, that we are we are LGBT people are not just one set of people who think alike, who behave the same way, who have the same aspirations and the same bonds from a city. We are very different people, and that's why even when we are speaking about planning, it doesn't help just taking a LGBT person as a part of your this thing and saying that we are inclusive. It's important to understand that there are different kinds of LGBT people, and you need to involve all of them in a part of your conversation so that no one is left out, because um, there is diversity outside, but one needs to be cognizant of the fact that there is diversity even within the LGBT community. So there is no one representation of the LGBT community. Like for instance, there are many times when we speak about the trans issues, and trans men get excluded because many a times we it doesn't uh, occur to civic authorities and other authorities that there is there are trans men as well. You know, they understand LGBT people as gay people. Sometimes lesbians get completely sidelined. Intersex is something that's never spoken about, or it's spoken interchangeably with transgender. So I think what's really important is to understand that we are, just as Parmesh said, 4 to 8% of the population, which means we are a sizable number. and there
Mhm.
is and you have to create an ecosystem where more and more people become a part of this, and diverse people get a part become a part of the conversation in the planning, in the process of the city. And I think now people have started opening up a little bit,
Mhm.
but there is too little that's happening right now, and we need to roll up our sleeves, and we all need to participate, participate in the process. We also live in silos. There are many people from the LGBT community who live in silos. We do not we live in our own prototypes and our own bubbles. We do not extend ourselves and go and meet LGBT people who are different from us. I think that's something that's needed as well. So while we are big enough that we can have communities within our community itself, it's also important that within the LGBT spectrum also we interact with each other, interact with other communities. Like for instance, in just in Bombay, I would say that there is a business community, LGBT business community. There is a LGBT dating community. There is an LGBT activism community. There's an LGBT cooking community. There is an LGBT accommodation community. So you have so many of these communities which are there, and within that also you have Ankit, who has the Gay Hindu Alliance. So
Yeah.
might disagree with his views and other things, but the truth is that these things exist, and what's important is that all these truths need to intermingle with each other. We need to discuss things with each other, and it needs to be inclusive of everybody. You can't just have one representation, even if there is somebody who claims to speak for the whole community. You can never have one person who could
You're
claim to
right.
speak for the whole community, because we are that heterogeneous.
I think we need to have more such conversation and bring architects, designers, and city leaders and politicians to, speak more to the community and understand where they are coming from. Abina, tell us, if you were to advise an architect or a urban designer or a urban policymaker, what can we do to make um, our cities more just from your perspective?
So I think for the first and foremost things, I think the opportunities for people like transgender people. I'll just give an example about that. The census of 2011 reports that there are approximately 5 lakh transgender people and 50,000 transgender children, which is below the age of 6. Forget about the children, but even if you talk about a 5 lakh, and 5 lakh is a tip of iceberg. We live in a country which has 132 crores of population, with 65% of sexual reproductive age people, and the male to female ratio is 11 to 9. Within that perspective, and if you calculate, a huge amount of transgender population which has not been reached to. A lot of this transgender population, the employment rate among the transgender people is less than 7%. If you allow these people to get employed, to do their own business and to contribute to economy, imagine how much GDP of a country is going to increase. A, how much employment opportunity these people are going to create for other people. Because if I'm a transgender person, if I start my own business, I would like to employ other transgender people. So skill building is important. At the same time, there has to be more opportunities for transgender people to be part of that. So even if you talk about architecture or any other initiatives that you are having, if you use transgender people's skill, improve their skill building, and also make them part of your initiatives, that is going to make your work more creative, and at the same time that is going to also give you a different perspective because of the sheer experience of transgender people go through, and the kind of insights that they would have on the subject matter related to house or related to other things and all those kind of things. The other thing that I want to talk about is that nothing about us without us. So, like for example, when we talk about Delhi government, recently Delhi government in Noida sector 50, they they dedicated one metro station to the transgender people by calling it as a she-mail. Now, that's a very derogatory term for a transgender person. They never consulted with us. They never, understood They were talked to us. Their motive was good, but we were not involved in those policies. We were not involved part of the discussions point. So communities has to be brought on the discussion point whenever you want to do something. Now the station name is, a Rainbow Metro Station, but still we don't have employment for transgender people. Even if when we talk about transgender, inclusion within the parameters. So what I'm trying to say to you is that when we talk about the inclusive Queeristan, is that we also have to, if there are people who are from the LGBT community, who are business owners, who are, who are running business or employment or HR person, they must encourage recruitment of transgender people, because transgender people are considered to be a transparent glass. We are at the forefront when it comes to the discrimination, and hatred, and murder, and all sorts of discrimination. Financial stability and financial independence for transgender people is the first step for transgender people to live the life with dignity, and that can only happen if you create spaces for transgender people within this new Queeristan. Transgender people are not asking for favor. What transgender people are asking for is platform. We are talking about equity at this point of time. And as Parmesh clearly said, that our trans men and trans women and intersex people are yet not being considered within the equal spaces of inclusivity, because a lot of people don't understand about them. The last thing I want to talk about, that creating an ecosystem wherever you are, if you are a LGBT, if you're not LGBT, in any public spaces, in any workspaces, in any other spaces, you say no to the discrimination towards LGBTI people. You just say no. You just say stop. There has to be everything painted on the wall saying that is, we shall not tolerate. We will look for an equal dignity, respect for everybody, and we shall not tolerate any sort of discrimination, any sort of kind of bullying, or any sort of hate gestures towards the LGBTI people. That has to be put it out right there. The other thing is about that right now we have digital media. India is the most important country at this point of time who is actually evolving digitally big time. And how can we use digital platform, what you're using right now, actually reach out to those biggies, like for example, Reliance, Ambani's, other, like Wipro and other companies actually create. Because see, like for example, even if they have a huge employee scale, so even if they start this kind of an initiative, it is going to be, it is going to be reflected in a big numbers. One architect and one other person is employing other person, and a big companies are actually creating policies for LGBTI people, especially for transgender. It creates a huge amount of a ripple effect within a society. The other companies, the small companies, look up to them. So I think I would really appeal through this platform and through the book that Parmesh is doing to all the Ambanis, Adanis, and everybody out there. How long you are going to shy away from saying that you are not inclusive for LGBT? How long are you going to wait till that time when one person of your own house comes up and says that I'm a gay person? Are we going to wait till that time? I'm also talking to Tatas and other people. How long we are going to wait for this opportunity where we are saying that, listen, when it will come to our doorstep, then we will think about it. Now it is time for you for a new Queeristan. Now it is time for you to step up. And now it is time for you to not shy away from saying that is, listen, we are not queer, but we don't shy away from standing with you. We don't shy away from respecting you. We don't shy away from including you in a society. And we are not shying away from creating an ecosystem for a young LGBTI person, from prohibiting from hanging himself or herself because he's or she's not accepted in a society. By creating those spaces, you are creating aspirations for that individual, and you are actually allowing that individual to give back to the society in the fullest form. in perspective of financial gains, in perspective of social inclusion, in perspective of creating more inclusive society. So I think that is a part of the system. We all are part of this ecosystem, but we all have to contribute to this ecosystem. This cannot be done by only LGBTI community. And I'm telling you honestly, the more you understand about the community, the more you fall in love with people like Harish, Parmesh, and everybody, because they give a lot of joy. There's a speciality, there's a special thing about LGBT community, that despite of all the pain and sorrows and bad experiences that you can see, you still see this beautiful dimple on face of Harish. He's not shying away from smiling. He's not sulking. He's not sulking. He's not being a Bina Kumari or other people, but he's giving back a smile to the world, saying that come to me. I will tell you how you can include me in a society.
That was so beautiful. I mean, it's that was so inspiring. I have to say, as someone who works on urban affairs, this was such a great session, and I think for me, a great city is one that allows the most marginalized or the weakest to thrive, and a city that's great for the weakest is a great city for all. And I think the message that you are saying, you all said, which is bring those marginalized, vulnerable community on the table, ask them questions while you design, develop, and build this new century of infrastructure. I think that's so crucial to build an inclusive community. And I want to really thank you for spending this hour talking to us about some of your ideas and struggles. And it's such a joy always to hear all of you speak.
Yeah, so whilst Pratima once again puts the Amazon link up, I want to say that we are going to have a tweet chat because we need to speak more about this. And we'll do it in the first week of September, closer to the anniversary of the Section 377 judgment. So watch out for that. But I really want to say thank you so much. This was a fascinating conversation, and there's so much to be done. And whilst people are excited, because I'm going to be talking at some other panels on these new traffic lights in Bombay, they could have gone one step further and shown all genders and not just women, because like I said earlier, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And that would have been transformative. Nevertheless, it's one baby step at a time sometimes. And we hope that with such conversations, with such books, with such vibrant community efforts, we can get policymakers and civic officials to think deeper about this issue and be more inclusive. And just for everybody, we are going to have our Urban Thinkers Campus middle of September. We'll be announcing that shortly. One of the things we are working on is metrics for inclusive and safe cities, and definitely it's going to have the LGBTQI, indicators as well for it. So if you want to be part of it, then please look out on our Facebook page, and we will put out more details. But thank you so much. Yeah.
But Elsa, we must
Thank you.
we must get Parmesh, Abhina, and Harish back there, because we're creating specific metrics for what makes the inclusive city. And like you all said, we have to bring all the communities on the table to define that, because often, the others are not aware of it. Unless we specify and measure it, we can't build back better. So I hope we can get you on board during that.
No, very, very happy to. I just wanted to say one thing, because what Abhina said, nothing, without us, nothing for us without us. So if anyone's reading the book, one of the pleasures in writing this was doing this last chapter, where there are more than 100 organizations that we've listed, including, Tweet Foundation, which Abhina runs, so many others which work on mental health, which work on so many of these other intersections, right? So if anyone who's watching this and wants to say, how do we work with queer people in creating, better cities, companies, just the last section of Queeristan it has all the details, it has their websites and numbers. So anything you want to hire trans people, there are about 5 consultants who are listed there who can help you. anyone who wants to come and be part of it, you don't have to do any work. There's the ecosystem is set. All you have to do is call and implement it. We've been doing the work for the past 20 years in building this ecosystem. Now it's there. Now just use it. Just use it and hire more of us. I mean, that's my last message.
Thank you. Have a great evening, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Pratima.